Welcome back, everyone. Are we live?
Oh yeah. I think this is
Okay,
round
yes.
two.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Urban Files. Join your hosts, Chuck and Max, as we discuss all things cities, development, anything related to cities at all. So, Max, how are things going for you right now?
Not bad, not bad. Sorry, I chuckle every time we go through the intros to the videos because um, I think I know behind the curtain like we we're like just wing it, but then we're like talk about these things, and I love how it changes slightly every time.
Yeah.
But
It's like a game of like telephone, right?
anyway, but yes, welcome to the Urban Files. Uh, And so, something that you and I both have sort of something we've been involved in to a very small degree, but for a long time now is we've been watching this community called Market Urbanism on Facebook grow. It's spearheaded by a fellow named Scott, and we'll talk about him some. But first, I just want to kind of establish the concept of market urbanism and what we've seen in that community over the last few years. Can you tell us?
Yeah. So really, market urbanism is kind of a focus on private or market oriented solutions that are kind of bottom up to urban related problems rather than top down. And so the idea or a central tenet is that the private market can do things better than the public government could, just for various reasons, just incentives or whatever else. And so that transport and some of the other things that we have around should be deregulated. That zoning in our cities and road construction is almost kind of a failed government policy and a big government policy that really hasn't developed the optimal solution. And
Yeah,
so it kind of really is looking at what can we do to put these things in the hands of the local cities and in the hands of citizens, whether it's the developing roads privately, whether it's more private automated transit solutions like anything from Uber to, bus collectivos or anything else that can, improve the urban landscape, less development regulations, anything like that.
yeah. It's basically the sort of the capitalist view of building cities, and I find it interesting. And I know both of us, we don't agree on a lot of the stuff that we see discussed in the group. But I think for me personally, it is very eye-opening and good to get a range of perspectives and arguments, right? But yeah, this is interesting to me because a lot of sort of the libertarians and capitalists that you often see, they would kind of allow government allow city development to fall under the purview of the government, because like if there's something that the government, it makes sense for the government to be involved in, it's those city services, transportation development, things like that. It's like, okay, we'll let the city um, provide a lot of guidance for those things. But so this is sort of taking capitalism to that final frontier and looking at how private enterprise might be a better solution, might provide better solutions, especially with fewer regulations and red tape involved.
Yes, and just one quick second, but I absolutely agree with you on that. And like I think one of the things that's really mentioned there is, and it kind of I think has some political appeal to both parties actually, is kind of the commenting on the highway system and really how that's basically subsidized automobiles and cars
Mhm.
and over time. And I think that maybe that would come from more of a left-wing perspective in a roundabout sort of way. But then obviously there's the right-wing presence of not just allowing one system there to like operate out of some like egalitarian perspective, but really just looking at what they think the best answer is. So
Mhm.
it is interesting, and what I think he's trying to explore in this process now is really like a global perspective. And so
So, yeah, so that brings us to the topic at hand today, which
yeah.
is the founder of this market urbanism community. He's also the founder of sort of the book and pushing this thought and advocacy organization, I guess, pushing forward. He is going on a trip across the global south, a massive trip, 1.5 years long, where he's going to be spending 6 months, give or take, in Latin America, 6 months in Africa, and then 6 months in sort of Southern Asia. And yeah, as a sort of an avid traveler and somebody who's been nomadic for periods of time, I just still find this very, very daunting. this trip that he's on, where I mean, he's not just traveling for a year and a half, but he's hitting, what is it? How many cities?
I think 50 cities, but even then
50
probably more
cities.
than that in terms of like all the surrounding areas.
Right.
And I think the
50.
goal is to visit 100 startup cities around these 50 cities. So traveling
Right.
extensively within all of these cities and metropolitan areas also.
Right. I mean, he's and again, and he's not like a traveler going to relax, a tourist doing something like that. He's going to research and investigate how different communities around across the global south are developing and growing at such a fast pace, but also how private cities, what he's calling startup cities that are being built by private enterprise, how they're approaching housing and providing for communities.
Yes, yes. And that part I think is especially interesting to me because one of the things that is a project, and he's kind of delved into a number of areas, and one of them appears to be kind of that investing component, but not really just like a real estate investment or even like a real estate investment trust in the way I think people would traditionally think about, but really just the city as an entire unit of investment. And so DMCC is a company that I really personally want to learn a little more about. And it's kind of a free trade zone organization based in Dubai. And it sounds like they're behind some of the projects that, not just in Dubai, that are kind of in Latin America so far. So really, it's pretty interesting, and it's opening my eyes to a lot of things I personally wasn't super familiar with before.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I naturally, from our communities and then our conversations, I'd come across a handful of these conceptual sort of startup cities, but certainly did not realize that there were hundreds popping up around the globe. And really, with that, with such a large number of them happening all at once, it really offers a lot of good insight into what the best approaches are and best practices. So Scott has been sharing on his trip for the past few months now, what he's seeing on the ground. I've seen some of this, but I think you, Chuck, have been following a lot more closely than me. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything that stands out to you so far from Scott's travels.
So I think one of the major concepts that he's mentioned in Latin America so far is just kind of a criticism of certain American city, regulations. I think especially what you might find in San Francisco with some of the policy I guess maybe anti-competitive in a sense, he thinks of it as, in terms of the transit organizations, and just that there is a lot more informal transit. And I think also just the variety of uses and kind of that hustle culture that he mentions there. And I think kind of like what is allowed to happen in the growth. And I think there's really a lot of merit there, that there's a number of types of neighborhoods and designs and, densities that, due to like city policy or whatever, just aren't allowed in the US. And given the fact that we really do have a housing affordability crisis in a lot of parts of the US, there's really, I think, a lot of good insight to be gleaned there. And in kind of that comment on public sphere and public realm, and just how complimentary he is of that there. I think a new term that he has described, which I think you and I have kind of found from visiting parts of Mexico City, like Condesa and Roma, that really lend that, but barrios tropicales, and kind of that is like lush landscaped neighborhoods with variety of uses, kind of appealing to a more affluent segment of the city's population. And well, I mean, I think I knew what he was talking about. I think it's helpful, kind of like, I'll credit you, your term of elegant urbanism that you mentioned a while back, that really a way of categorizing these places that we really don't have a lot of in the US.
Okay. I think I guess I'm also curious then, what if any negatives do you think might come from sort of the way Scott is approaching this global tour, or what could he perhaps do better, I guess?
Well, so I think it's, well, I guess I will say one thing. I was a little bit maybe surprised or a little disappointed to hear how much he didn't like Brazil. And I don't mean that writ large. He commented on a city there that's kind of more of a startup type concept, even if not fully. Balneario Camboriú. And that's going to be an interesting pronunciation in general, but that Sao Paulo and a number of these cities really were riddled with problems and kind of like just not really a pleasant experience. So given that Sao Paulo was high on my list just as a place to visit, as kind of being a chief city in South America, that was a little disappointing for me to
well,
hear. My expectation there wouldn't be great, but I guess helpful in a sense. But
I mean, to allay your fears or disappointment, I think the very nature of what he's undertaking, going to so many places so quickly, means that he has to sort of create these hot takes, sort of these quick perceptions that
true.
that are very, I think, superficial, and he needs to do that because he's going through so many places at once. He has to very quickly analyze, categorize, and then compare with all the other things that he's seeing. So certainly, I think you can still keep Sao Paulo on your list and be excited when you eventually make it there. But yeah, sorry, continue. Just wanted to say, it's the nature of what he's doing. So
the timeline is really accelerated. So, and it's such a massive city, so it can be hard to get like a full perspective there with that. And I think also it's, I guess, from a question of the living in these areas, one of the complaints of US cities that's commonplace is like Austin. This is true for Seattle, with comments about the tech bros moving in and all of that stuff. That people discover this nice place that's a hidden gem, and then everyone comes in and ruins it because it's too expensive then. And I've heard a little bit of that commentary even from people that are locals in Mexico City, but I can't help but wonder if, I don't have a dog as much in the fight in these places, but I wonder how much anti-foreign sentiment will be present as, potentially some more people continue to funnel in to these kind of opportunity zones. I mean, I know obviously the cost of living is significantly cheaper and the opportunity is there. And I just wonder how the governments will respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, it inherently segregates communities, right? Which uh, which I guess on face value is not what you want for a community, but is what you could say is happening regardless. Like people are
Anyways,
going to
yeah,
look
yeah,
for a better place for them and their family as soon as they're able to. And so I don't think all startup cities are exclusive in an elitist way. Certainly the goal is to be more inclusive with them and replicable. So if you find the best practices, you can replicate them wherever it's needed. But certainly it definitely to some degree separates people because you're looking at trying to create a holistic city community
yeah,
in an area where everything needed is right there, and there's not necessarily a reason to have traffic coming and going, if you will.
yeah, for sure. And I think the other side of that argument too is kind of the argument in general when like luxury housing units or whatever high rises are added in a city is okay, more high rise units, but maybe the flip side of that argument then would be it's creating more housing flat out for everyone so that the wealthy will take those existing units and or those new units, and the existing units be a little more affordable. So,
Sort of a
and
trickle
who knows,
down, economics in another way.
Yes, yeah, in a sense, yeah. So,
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about this, and of course, he's still got many more months and many more cities to go to. But is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I just really find it to be a cool project, and I mean, being that I'm working in a cubicle and most of it, and I'm kind of location rooted right now. I mean, I'm living vicariously through him and you, so I hope to
Right, he's
really hear more about his travels as we move forward. So,
yeah, I mean,
and
he's
yeah,
if you go to the website marketurbanismreport.com, you can click over to see the world trip, market urbanism world trip, where he has a pretty cool global map graphic showing his entire itinerary as he travels through through 4 continents, maybe 5. I have to
yep,
see where exactly he gets to, but either 4 or 5 different continents, and some very exciting in different ways, exciting destinations.
yeah.
um yeah, do you have something in particular that you can't wait to see?
I'm looking forward to you guys hanging out in Taipei later next year.
Yeah, we did say if he does make it here, which he's planning to towards the very end of his trip, he is planning to come to Taipei. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for him and try to show him around if he's if we're there when he arrives. So
Absolutely.
cool. Well, it's fun as always to chat, Chuck, and till next time.
Alrighty.